Welcome back to Explorium Academy. In this video, we're going to be going through our documentation. Okay, so right now I have pulled up the Explorium documentation that you can find right on the Explorium website. This documentation covers everything from how to access each of our API endpoints, to the recommended workflow, to examples, to how to navigate your admin page, or even error handling and rate limits. And I do recommend that after watching this video, you take some time to explore our documentation yourself and really go into more detail in each of the different aspects. But today we're just going to do a quick overview on some of the what I think are the most important aspects of our documentation and how to get you started on using the Explorium data. So first, what I think is really important is the recommended workflow and how to use each of our endpoints. And you can find this in the quick starts part of our documentation. There's a lot of information here on how to get started, why use Explorium, how to access your API key and create an Explorium account, and so on. But after you do that on your own time, you can find this part here that is our recommended workflow. And our recommended workflow is pretty simple. And the main thing that you should remember is that you should first do our match, fetch, and statistics endpoints. And then after that, you can access our enrichments and events endpoints. And this is because in our match and fetch endpoints, this is where you put in different parameters or company names and so on, and you will receive an Explorium ID. And with those Explorium IDs, whether it's a prospect ID or a business ID, you can then use those IDs to enrich further information from our enrichment endpoints. So now going into some of the specifics, we can access the business endpoints here on the menu on the left-hand side. And you can see that the first three endpoints that are shown are the match, fetch, and business statistics. What business statistics does is it essentially will give you different statistics on the total addressable market or different metrics that you're looking for in terms of the companies in the ICP that you were searching. But the match and fetch endpoints are where you get the IDs that I mentioned previously. The match endpoint specifically gives you a singular ID for a specific company that you are interested in. So say I want to look up Apple. I can put Apple into the match endpoint and it will give me the Explorium ID for Apple. On the other hand, fetch will give you many different IDs for a general category of businesses. For example, if I want to find businesses that have certain firmographic bands, whether it's employee count, revenue range, and so on, I can put those parameters into the fetch endpoint and it can give me all businesses that meet these parameters. And then again, once I have these IDs, we can move forward and you can use business events, which you can find here, or you can do, and this would be the fetch business events. We also have other event endpoints that you can use to set up webhooks to monitor different events in real time. Or we have business enrichments, which you can do here, firmographic, technographics, and so on. And you can find all of our data offerings in our data catalog. And then similarly, we have the same thing for our prospect endpoints. In the same manner as business, we have to use the match, fetch, or statistics endpoints first. But there is something important here that I forgot to mention is the autocomplete endpoint, and this endpoint is meant to help you find the different syntax for our parameters easier. For example, if you wanted to use industry for one of our parameters, there are certain different industries that we accept as valid parameters, but autocomplete takes maybe an incomplete phrase or a similar industry and will match it to the closest industry that we have in our database. And back to how to use prospects. Similarly, you can use match to find a specific prospect, whether you have an ID or whether you have an email, a LinkedIn URL, or their name. And then fetch is, again, when you want to get multiple IDs for a general group of prospects. And then again, once you get the IDs, you have access to all of the enrichments using these IDs, whether it's prospect events or specific prospect enrichments. And then if you go further down, you can see that there's error handling and rate limits, which I'm not going to go into now, but I will touch on in a later video. And something more that I wanted to touch on is if you have any questions on our documentation at all, feel free to reach out to support, our Explorium support, or you can chat with our chatbot here on the bottom and ask any question. This is gonna be very simple, but like, how do I use the match businesses endpoint? Oops. And you could do that here. And our chatbot, which has access to all of our documentation, should give you a very thorough and detailed response, and then also tell you where to look for in our documentation page. Our documentation website will be linked in the video below, and again, I highly recommend that after this video, you take some time to really look at this in more detail and learn the best you can. Okay, so right now I have a blank project open in n8n, and we were going to use it to show you how to use the Explorium match node here. As you know, when starting any project in n8n, we first need to add a trigger node. You can do this here by adding the first step, and it will open all the trigger options that we have available. For simplicity, in this project, we're just going to do a trigger manually. Now, once you have your trigger inputted into this project, you can click on the plus button here on the right, and it will give you all of the nodes that n8n has available in their library. For this video, we want the Explorium nodes, so you can search Explorium in the search bar, and it will give you either Explorium API or Explorium MCP. For this video, we want the Explorium API nodes. However, the Explorium MCP is another product that we have offered here at Explorium that is extremely powerful, and I will go into it more in a later video. Now, clicking here on the Explorium API, we have the 5 options that we've gone over before: match, enrich, fetch, events, and autocomplete. Like I mentioned in this video, we're going to go over match. So if you click on that, it will go ahead and open that node. And just to show you, the node has been inputted into our workflow here. Now, going back into the node, you can see that the first thing that you have to input is your credentials. I already have mine inputted, but you would need to input your API key and other information here. Now you can see that the operation that we have selected is match. If you wanted to go and select another Explorium operation, you can go in here and select the other options that we have available. But as I mentioned in another video, the first operations that you should be doing when using the Explorium nodes is either match or fetch. So you should go ahead and do those first. And then, so for this video, we're going to go ahead and do match. For this first example, we're going to show you how to match a business. If you wanted to match a prospect, you could also change that here under the type field. Now, you can click choose here, and it will open the different fields that we need to fill out in order to get a valid business ID. Now, you don't need to fill out both of these fields in order to get a valid business ID, but the more information you have, the stronger the match will be. Now, for the sake of this example, let's use NVIDIA. And again, it should work with just company name, but again, if you have the domain, use that as well. Now, let's just leave this node and click execute workflow. Awesome, workflow executed successfully. If we go back into this node, we can see that we got a valid business ID for NVIDIA. Now, let's go over how to match a prospect. So if we go over here and just change the type to prospect, you can see that now it's prospects to match. If you click choose here, it will now give us the different fields that we need to enter in order to find a valid prospect ID. Again, don't need to fill out all the fields, but the more you have, the better. If you just input company name, it will not give you a valid prospect ID. There's not enough information there. Okay, so we do have the business ID from NVIDIA, so we can go ahead and just put that in there. Now, let's find the CEO of NVIDIA. Let's do Jensen Huang at nvidia.com. That is his email. And we can go now leave this workflow and click execute workflow. Workflow executed successfully. We go in here, we click, awesome. We have a valid prospect ID for Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. Now, if you wanted any more information on Jensen Huang, you can go ahead and enrich it further with these IDs. I recommend that you go into n8n now and give it a try and play around with the Explorium match node. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to use the fetch Explorium endpoint in n8n. So let's first add that node into our workflow. And just by searching Explorium, you can see we can add the fetch endpoint here. Okay, so now this node has been added to our workflow, and we can now play around with it. We already have our credentials inputted. Operation is fetch. We are going to be fetching businesses in this example. Later in the video, we're going to fetch for prospects. And you can see there's a few other new parameters that are available in the fetch endpoint. First off is mode. For most cases, we are going to want to set the mode to full, so it returns all of the complete data for each record. The next is size. This dictates or limits how many businesses we want returned when we are fetching. So right now it's set to 50, so if we were to run it with a certain amount of criteria, it would return the top 50 results for that criteria. For the sake of this example, let's set it to 10. Okay, the next is page size. So the way that fetch works is it returns a certain amount of businesses per page. And the way that your pages are configured is important based on what you want to do with the information in later steps. So if I were to set page size to 10, because the page size at its max can be the full number of businesses that we have returned. If I were to set the page size to 10, it would return all 10 businesses on one page. If I were to set the page size to 1, it would return 10 pages with one business per page. So this makes pagination extremely easy for when we want to work with each returned business individually, but if we wanted to bulk enrich, for example, we could set it to 10. Now, similar to match, we have all of the different fields that we need to fill out in order to tailor our criteria to fetch certain types of businesses. So for the sake of this example, let's find businesses in the US. We don't care about the city, the company, revenue, but let's do company size. Let's find businesses that have an employee count of 200 to 500 people and 501 to 1,000 employees. We don't care about these, but again, if you do, fill them out. And then let's find software development companies. Just gonna spell. Okay. Again, there's many more fields that you can fill out to tailor criteria further. Awesome. We have our information filled out in the fetch node. Let's execute the workflow. Executed successfully. If we go back in, we can see now that we have 10 businesses returned on one page. And it also returns all of their relevant information, including their business ID, which you can now further enrich in later steps. But it also gives name, domain, logo, and so much more relevant information that you can use here. Now, like I mentioned, if you change the page size to 1 and re-executed the step, it would now return only one business per page, but you can see that there are a total of 10 results on 10 pages. Now, moving on, if we wanted to fetch prospects, for example, it is a very similar process. Set the mode to full. We want to set the size to limit the amount of prospects we want returned. Again, let's set 10. Let's return 10 prospects on each page. And then let's fill in the different fields. So what type of prospects do we want? Let's find prospects. Let's find CXOs and directors that have a valid professional email and have a valid phone number. Let's find these prospects in the US with companies that have between 50 and 200 people. Awesome. Now if we leave this and we execute the workflow, executed successfully, and we go back in, now we can see that we have the relevant prospect IDs, their hashed email, which you would need to, which shows that they have a valid professional email. You need to enrich it further in order to get that professional email from us. And some other relevant information about them. You can see that this is 10 prospects. If we wanted to set page size to 1 and re-execute the step, it is similar to how fetch businesses worked, where it would return one prospect per page. where you can see we got 10 results on 10 different pages. I recommend that you guys go ahead and give this a try now and get familiar with the fetch node in n8n. Okay, so right now I have the n8n project open from the match example video, and we're just going to continue on it today to show how to use the Explorium Enrich endpoint, specifically in n8n. So, like that video, we still have the NVIDIA example open in the match endpoint for businesses. So let's move on now and add the Enrich node. So let's get Explorium Enrich node, add that in. All right, so similar to our other nodes, you have to first input your credentials, select with operation, which type, and so on. But what is new is now we have to choose which enrichments we want to add. For businesses, you have a lot of different enrichments to choose from: firmographics, technographics, company ratings. For this example, and not to overload the screen with a lot of information, let's choose firmographic information on NVIDIA, and maybe we're interested in the competitive landscape of that industry. Okay, we have those two selected. Now all we need to add is the Explorium business ID that we got from the match node in the previous step, which is actually right here. So all you have to do is drag that here into the Explorium business ID field, and boom, it's already inputted. And the beautiful thing about n8n is that if something changes in the previous node, now that you just dragged the relevant field here, it will update automatically. So maybe you wanted to get information on Apple and we changed the previous node, the business ID would update automatically for this node. Okay, so now we have everything set up for the Enrich node. Let's leave here and execute the workflow. Awesome, workflow executed successfully. Now you can see here that we have all of our enriched information here on the right hand side. First here we have the firmographic information, which includes the business description, the name. Scroll down a little bit, we got address information, industry information such as NAICS, SIC code, employee range, revenue range. There's so much information in the firmographics bundle that again you can explore in our data catalog. Now, if we go down, now we have our competitive landscape enrichment that we added, and we have the competitive differentiation, which is a long description on how NVIDIA differentiates themselves in the competitive landscape. And awesome, we have all the information we requested on NVIDIA. Very simple. Now, say we wanted to enrich a prospect. Taking the same example that we had before, I've already brought it over here. This is the CEO of NVIDIA. Now let me just disconnect here, move this to the side. All right, now we're just gonna connect up the match from our last example. All right, this is the prospect match, and just to show you, it's the same as the last video. We have the business ID from NVIDIA and the professional email of Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. All right, we have that all matched up. Let's execute this real quick just to get the prospect ID. Awesome. Now let's change the type to prospect. And now you can see that we have the different prospect enrichments that we have available. We have contact information, LinkedIn post, professional profile. For this example, let's see Jensen Huang's professional profile. Similar to the business enrichment, we have the prospect ID that we need to get inputted, which is right here from the previous step. So we just have to drag that over here. Process is exactly the same. Now we can exit here and execute the entire workflow. And there you go. Beautiful, executed successfully. And now we have the professional profile of Jensen Huang. We can see where he's from, his LinkedIn profile, his experience, his skills, his age, educational experience, and so much more that we have as different signals in the professional profile. Now these are both just two very simple examples of how to use the enrichment endpoint in n8n, and I highly recommend that you guys go into n8n now and give it a try and explore further. Okay, we're back in n8n with our previous NVIDIA example from the match node video, and today we are now going to continue on with this workflow to show you how to use Explorium's events endpoint. So if we continue on here and we get the Explorium events endpoint, let's get it all filled out. Okay, so first things first, like the Enrich endpoint, let's get the business ID that we previously matched on from NVIDIA, which is right here. Let's drag that into the correct section. Okay, boom, that is done. Now, the important part of events is choosing what events we want to fetch. Now, there's many different events to choose from, and again, you should tailor it based on the different businesses that we have that we're looking for. So, for NVIDIA, it is a very established company, and we're interested in maybe whether they've had any new products recently. So let's look for that. Again, you can choose many different events at one time, but for the sake of simplicity, let's only look for a new product launch recently for NVIDIA. And then we also have these two other fields down below, from date and to date, and this lets you dictate the time frame in which the events happen. If you leave these blank, it defaults to looking for time frames in the last quarter or the last 3 months. Okay, so now let's exit out of the node and execute the workflow. Awesome, executed successfully. Let's see what we got. Okay, so it looks like NVIDIA on January 7th, 2026 had a new product, the Digital Twin Composer, which is technology that they combined in a partnership with Siemens. And we have a whole description on the new product, a link from the announcement, and title, a snippet, and so much more information. Awesome. The process is very similar for prospect events, and since we've done this before, I'm not going to go into more depth here, but again, all you'd have to do is input the prospect ID here, select the prospect events you want, role change, company change, new position, and execute the workflow. Again, like all my other example videos, I recommend that you guys go and play around with this yourself and get familiar with the Explorium nodes. They're going to come in handy in our much more in-depth and complicated projects in the future.